$7.25 per hour. That is the federal minimum wage in the United States. It has not changed since July of 2009. 16 years. The price of eggs has doubled. The price of rent has tripled in some cities. The price of gasoline has swung up and down like a heartbeat monitor. But the federal minimum wage has not moved a single penny in 16 years. I wanted to know what that number actually feels like. Not as a statistic on a news broadcast, not as a talking point in a political debate, but as a lived reality. So I did the math, built the budget, and spent 30 days living on nothing but a minimum wage income. If you stay until the end of this video, you will see exactly where every dollar went, what I had to sacrifice, what surprised me, and the one brutal truth about minimum wage that nobody is willing to say out loud. Let me start with the math because the math is where the illusion falls apart. $7.25 per hour, 40 hours per week. That is $290 per week before taxes. Multiply by 4 weeks, and you get $1,160 per month gross income. But nobody takes home their gross income. After federal income tax, state tax, and Social Security and Medicare deductions, the actual take-home pay drops to roughly $950 to $1,000 per month, depending on the state. I used the national average. My budget for 30 days was $980. That is it. That is everything. Rent, food, transportation, phone, and every other expense a human being needs to stay alive. $980. The first thing I had to figure out was where to live. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in the United States in 2025 is $1,534 per month. That is already $554 more than my entire monthly income. A one-bedroom apartment is mathematically impossible on minimum wage. So I looked for the cheapest option available. A single room in a shared house. After searching for days, I found the lowest realistic option at $450 per month, including utilities. That is already 46% of my total income gone before I eat a single meal. Financial experts say you should spend no more than 30% of your income on housing. At minimum wage, the cheapest room I could find already consumed nearly half. $450 for rent. That leaves $530 for everything else for the entire month. 30 days. $17.67 per day. That has to cover food, transportation, a phone, hygiene products, laundry, and anything unexpected. $17.67. To put that in perspective, that is less than the cost of a single lunch at Chipotle with a drink and chips. Let me break down how I allocated every remaining dollar. Food budget. I set at $150 for the month. That is $5 per day. Transportation. I set at $60 for a monthly bus pass in a mid-sized city. Phone. I found the cheapest prepaid plan available at $25 per month for basic talk, text, and minimal data. Hygiene products including soap, shampoo, toothpaste, deodorant, and laundry detergent. I budgeted $30 for the month. That totals $265 in fixed expenses beyond rent. $450 plus $265 equals $715. My total income is $980. That leaves $265 of breathing room for the entire month. Except breathing room is a generous term because that $265 has to absorb anything and everything that goes wrong. Day one started at the grocery store. $5 a day for food sounds manageable until you actually stand in a grocery aisle and do the math in real time. A dozen eggs costs $3.40. A loaf of white bread costs $2.70. A gallon of milk costs $4.10. A bag of rice costs $3.50. A bag of dried beans costs $2. A bundle of bananas costs $1.20. I filled my cart with the cheapest calories I could find. Rice, beans, eggs, bread, peanut butter, bananas, and a bag of frozen vegetables. My first grocery trip cost $38 and covered roughly the first week. No fresh meat, no cheese, no coffee, no snacks, no variety, just fuel. By day 3, the monotony hit hard. Breakfast was 2 eggs and a slice of bread. Lunch was rice and beans. Dinner was rice and beans with a different seasoning. The meals kept me alive, but they did not keep me satisfied. I started to understand something that statistics never capture. Poverty is not just a financial condition. It is a psychological one. When every meal is the same, when every dollar is pre-allocated, when there is zero room for spontaneity, your mind starts to feel trapped even when your body is technically fed. Day 7 brought the first unexpected expense. I needed to do laundry. The laundromat charged $2.25 per wash and $2 per dry cycle. One load of laundry cost $4.25. That does not sound like much until you remember that my daily budget for everything beyond fixed expenses is $8. $4.83. A single load of laundry consumed almost half of one day's discretionary budget. I started hand washing some clothes in the sink to save money. That is not a life hack. That is survival math. Day 10. I got a headache that would not go away. I needed pain medication. A small bottle of generic ibuprofen cost $5.47. That is more than my entire daily food budget. I bought it because the headache was affecting my ability to function, but I felt the weight of that purchase for the rest of the week. $5.47. In a normal income situation, you would not even remember spending that amount. On minimum wage, it is a decision that requires calculation and trade-offs. I ate less that day to compensate. Day 14. Halfway through, I sat down and recalculated my remaining budget. Rent paid. Bus pass paid. Phone paid. Groceries for the first 2 weeks spent. Laundry twice. Ibuprofen once. I had $147 left for the remaining 16 days. That is $9.19 per day. Still technically survivable. But one emergency would destroy everything. One flat tire on a bicycle. One urgent dental issue. One unexpected bill. The margin between surviving and drowning is so thin that it barely exists. Day 17 brought a social cost that no budget spreadsheet accounts for. A coworker invited me to grab lunch. A normal human interaction. The kind of thing that builds relationships and advances careers. The restaurant was nothing fancy, but even a basic meal would cost $12 to $15. I could not afford it. I made an excuse and ate my rice and beans alone. This is the part of minimum wage life that economists never quantify. The social isolation. The inability to participate in the basic rituals of human connection that everyone else takes for granted. You do not just lose money on minimum wage. You lose access to the social fabric that holds careers and relationships together. Day 20. I ran out of peanut butter and bananas. My grocery list for the remaining 10 days had to be even more stripped down. Rice, beans, eggs, and the cheapest frozen vegetables I could find. I spent $11.30. My meals became even more repetitive. Breakfast was eggs and rice. Lunch was beans and rice. Dinner was beans, rice, and a few pieces of frozen broccoli. The nutritional quality was barely adequate. I was getting calories, but I was not getting variety, not getting fresh fruits, not getting adequate protein. I started feeling tired by the afternoon every day. Not sick, just depleted. The kind of fatigue that comes from your body running on the cheapest fuel available. Day 23. My phone screen cracked. Not badly. Just a small crack in the corner from dropping it on concrete. On a normal income, I would have barely noticed. On minimum wage, a cracked phone screen is a crisis. Replacing the screen costs $60 to $80. Replacing the phone costs even more. I could afford neither. I put tape over the crack and kept using it. This is what minimum wage actually looks like. It is not dramatic poverty with tattered clothes and empty refrigerators. It is tape on a cracked phone screen. It is hand washing clothes in a sink. It is saying no to lunch with a coworker. It is small daily indignities that accumulate until they become your entire identity. Day 25. I calculated that I had eaten the same rice and beans combination for at least 20 of the past 25 days. I craved something different with an intensity that surprised me. Not steak, not sushi, just a piece of chicken, a fresh tomato, a cup of coffee from a real coffee shop. These are things that most Americans consume without a second thought. On minimum wage, they feel like luxuries from another universe. I spent $2.80 on a single chicken thigh from the discount section of the grocery store. I cooked it with the last of my rice and a few drops of hot sauce. It was the best meal I had eaten in 3 weeks. Not because of the taste, because of the novelty. When your life has no variety, even the smallest change feels like a gift. Day 28. 2 days before the end. I had $19 left. Rent for next month would be due in 3 days. If this were real life and not an experiment, I would need $450 ready in 72 hours. On minimum wage, that means my entire next paycheck goes directly to rent before I even think about food. The cycle never breaks. You earn just enough to pay for the cheapest version of survival, and then the month resets and you do it all over again. There is no savings. There is no upward mobility. There is no light at the end of the tunnel because the tunnel has no end. Day 30. The last day. I had $6.12 remaining from $980. $6. I did not save any money. I did not invest any money. I did not go to a restaurant, see a movie, buy new clothes, visit a doctor, contribute to retirement, or do a single thing that could be considered building a future. I survived. That is it. 30 days of pure survival on the federal minimum wage. Here is what those 30 days taught me. The first lesson is that minimum wage is not designed for living. It is designed for surviving. There is a difference. Living means having choices. Surviving means having none. On minimum wage, every single dollar is spoken for before you earn it. There is no decision to make because there is no flexibility to decide with. The second lesson is that poverty is expensive. This sounds like a paradox, but it is brutally true. I could not buy in bulk because I did not have enough cash up front. I could not cook diverse meals because I could not afford the ingredients. I could not maintain my health proactively because I could not afford a doctor visit. I could not invest in a better phone plan because the cheap plan had terrible coverage and cost me time. Every shortcut I was forced to take because of low income actually cost me more in the long run. Being poor is the most expensive way to live. The third lesson is that the gap between minimum wage and actual cost of living is not a gap. It is a canyon. In 1968, the minimum wage adjusted for inflation was equivalent to about $12.77 in today's money. The actual federal minimum wage today is $7.25. Workers in 1968 had more purchasing power than workers today, earning the same minimum wage. The cost of everything has gone up. The wage floor has stayed frozen. That is not an oversight. That is a policy choice. And the people making that choice are not the ones living on $7.25 an hour. The fourth lesson is the one nobody wants to hear. You cannot budget your way out of minimum wage. Every personal finance influencer tells you to cut expenses, skip the latte, cook at home, cancel subscriptions. I did all of that. I did not buy a single latte. I cooked every meal. I had no subscriptions. I cut everything that could possibly be cut. And I still ended the month with $6. The problem is not spending. The problem is earning. When your income is $980 and the bare minimum cost of survival is $974, no amount of budgeting genius will create wealth. The math does not work. It was never designed to work. 30 days is enough to understand the math. But for 21 million Americans who earn at or near minimum wage, 30 days is not an experiment. It is January, then it is February, then March, then the rest of their lives. The federal minimum wage has not changed in 16 years. 16 years of rising rent. 16 years of rising food costs. 16 years of rising healthcare costs. And the number on the paycheck stays exactly the same. $7.25. That is not a wage. That is a ceiling disguised as a floor.